You got me?
Yeah.
All right. What's up?
How you doing?
Good.
Welcome to the show, Mad Max Radio WSU.
So you're not on the station right now?
No, because all the students are out of the station, so now we're running them on our individual platform.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's an unpredictable time. I know the transition's been very hard for the students. How's it been for you? Because I know you do Sirius XM. You're on many.
I do it from home. I do it from home every day, 7 to 10 every morning. Right here. That's what I do tomorrow morning.
Is it rough getting up in the morning?
Nah, it used to be. When you get older, it's not that hard.
Do you prefer being at home now?
Oh, I love it. I love everything about it. So much. The lifestyle is so much better. Hang on one second. I'm just going to lower the lights for a second, all right? Hang on one second.
It's perfect.
I think a little bit better. Yeah, I set up the studio for Around the Horn down here.
Oh, yeah?
I was doing it upstairs, but, people, these landscapers, they come by with the leaf blower. It makes too much noise. Down here, there's no noise. It's amazing.
The worst is when there's a big truck that goes by my house and it just interferes with the audio.
Well, there's a couple of people who do the show, like Pablo Torre lives in Manhattan.
Yeah.
So yesterday there was like banging in his apartment, some apartment either above him or beneath him. But I'm hoping I try to make it perfect here because I don't want to go back into the city. I'd rather just do it from here.
For good, right?
Oh my, it saves me so much time,
How long is the commute usually from the city?
I live in Montclair, New Jersey, which is maybe 13 miles from the city. But I park on the west side and then I take the subway down to the South Street Seaport.
Mm.
Yeah. You go to St. John's now?
Yeah.
The coach of the soccer team lives near me, Dave Mazer.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'm friends with Dave. He's completely nuts. I go to a lot of the St. John's soccer games.
What was the last one that you went to?
When they played Georgetown.
Okay.
That was a huge crowd. It was 1 versus 2. Georgetown was excellent. Then my daughter goes to Villanova, so I went to the Villanova St. John's game in late February, and I saw Jason Williams there. I've known Jason for a million years. He looked really good. Jason's a great guy. You should get him on.
Yeah. That would definitely be something I would do in the future. But I want to get into a background about yourself. I know people usually like to have you on to just get you for sports info, but tell me why you chose to go to the University of Maryland.
It was the only school that would take me. No, I wanted to go to a big school which had a lot of sports and big time sports in the ACC. I mean, you're at St. John's, the Big East, it's the same thing. Maryland, though, we do have football, but I wanted to go to a big school near a big city. And I figured, well, if I go down to Maryland, I'll be one of the few. Now, I grew up in New York, so I figured I'll be one of the few New Yorkers there. Little did I know when I got to Maryland, half the student body was from New York and a ton of people, male and female students from New Jersey. So I thought I'd be unique. Wasn't the case. A lot of us down there.
What was the most important class that you took during your time at the University of Maryland?
That's a good question. I did take a lot of journalism classes, which were really interesting. A couple of history. I was terrible at math. See, if I was good at math, I probably wouldn't do this. I'd probably try to get a job where I could make a lot of money. I'm always jealous of people that are good at math. I'm so bad at it. But I would say a couple of journalism classes, which were good. But still, when you're in journalism, going out and actually doing the job is part of it. But I will tell you this. I took it was like a theater class, which we talked a lot about movies and Broadway shows. And the teacher was so passionate about it. It made the class so interesting. So it's like anything. If you have someone who's passionate about it and cares about you getting better and learning, no matter what it is, you'll be good at that, or you'll pay attention and you'll want to learn. So even though, listen, he's talking about Broadway musicals and stuff, but the way that he did it, talked about the history, and he was so passionate about it, it made you get interested in it, as opposed to just somebody sitting there and talking like in a monotone voice and telling, and I think that's why I always say about like coaches and teachers, the best ones you have are the ones that are passionate and they're trying to push you. Maybe you don't like it as it's happening, but years down the road, you say, you know what, that was the best thing for me.
And you were a walk-on for the soccer team there, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was terrible. I was there at a time when, Tab Ramos was playing for NC State. Tab Ramos is one of the best American soccer players of all time. I'd say Christian Pulisic now is probably the greatest, even at a young age. But John Harkes was at Virginia. So there were some great players down there. But it was fun because, they gave you free stuff, which is nice. Free cleats. I'd never gotten free cleats before. And what I liked about it was they allowed you to register for your classes before everyone else did. So anybody who was on any athletic team would get to go, because it was tough. You wanted to make sure you got good classes. So back then I would have, my schedule would be, my first class Monday was like at 11 in the morning, and Friday somehow I figured out where I was off. So you know how it is in college. You're just pulling off one scam after another, trying to manage your way through somehow.
Were you involved at your college radio station at all?
Yeah, I was. In fact, I'll tell you a good story. So I wasn't doing as much. I was writing for the school newspaper, which was good because back then it was called the Diamondback. We were getting paid per story, and they were giving you $10 per story. It was good. First of all, you're getting experience. You're covering sporting events, which are being covered by the Washington Post and the Baltimore Sun. So they're big time events, and you're getting paid. And it was a daily paper. It came out Monday through Friday. But the radio station, my buddy Frank DeGrace, who right now is one of the big producers at the Yes Network, he produces all the Nets coverage. He travels with them, and they do. They have a great broadcasting team: Ian Eagle, Ryan Rucco, Sarah Kustok, Richard Jefferson, the whole crew. So Frank was on the station doing play-by-play, and every once in a while I'd fill in as a statistician. We went down. Now I'm going to age myself here. We went down in I believe it was 86 or 87, Maryland played North Carolina. North Carolina was number one in the country. They had not lost a game yet at their new building, which was the Dean Dome, the Dean Smith Center. On that team was Brad Daugherty, Kenny Smith. That was the game where Len Bias hits a three. You always saw the highlight. He hit a three, then he steals the inbound pass from Kenny Smith, and he dunked it backward. It was like it showed you the whole array of what Len Bias was as a player. So that was a big thrill being down there for what was a pretty monumental regular season game in the ACC. And it really was, in a lot of ways, kind of solidified Len Bias as, one of the biggest stars in college basketball.
Now, was this when Michael Jordan left the team?
Yeah, he was gone. Michael Jordan, I'm that old. Michael Jordan had been gone a couple of years. Patrick had already left Georgetown. I guess he would have been in the NBA about a year already. Because the year before, as a student, my friends and we were I loved college basketball, and we were fanatics. So we would go, Georgetown played at the Cap Center, which was a dumpy arena in Landover, Maryland. That's where Georgetown played, the Washington Capitals, and the Bullets back then would play. It was not a good place. It was pretty close to University of Maryland. One of the first Saturdays back after winter break, Christmas break, St. John's and Georgetown played each other. That was the year they played each other 4 times. Mm-hmm. St. John's was 2 in the country. Georgetown was 1. St. John's went into Landover. And I was a huge Chris Mullin fan, Lou Carnesecca, Walter Berry, the whole thing. St. John's goes into Georgetown, wins the game, and that Monday they were ranked number 1 in the country. It was, the place was packed. It was Patrick Ewing. It was incredible. So they played 4 times that year. In Landover, in New York, Big East final, and then Final Four where they played each other. So I was at the one game that St. John's won down in Maryland, which was pretty cool.
They're not winning anymore.
It's tough. The problem was back then, it's like there's so many Division I teams, and you don't know what kids are looking for. Now, if I were St. John's, what I would do, you go to a lot of these campuses, because I've been to, everyone should at one point in their life try to make it down to Durham to go to Cameron Indoor Stadium, because it's such a great environment. So think about it. That's the premier basketball program in the country for over 30 years, right? Yeah. And that's a small venue. And the place absolutely rocks. See, I think what St. John's should be doing is just refurbish what they have on campus. It's still called what?
Carnesecca Arena.
And now it's Carnesecca. It used to be Alumni Hall back in the day. I would play most of my games there. You want to play like a big out-of-conference game like Duke or somebody at Madison Square Garden, I get it. Maybe 1 or 2 games in the Big East at Madison Square Garden. I think that part of it has worn off, because you go down to Georgetown games, they play downtown D.C. at an NBA arena, And when there's only like 5,000 people there, I don't know. It's not. Why not put 5,000 people in a smaller gym? The place will rock.
It would. And you mentioned Patrick Ewing before at Georgetown, because I'm a huge New York Knicks fan. And when we bring up Patrick Ewing, and his name doesn't come up a lot when we talk about top 5 centers, top 10 centers, how come you don't think his name comes up when we mention top centers of all time?
It's weird, right? I think actually Patrick, this is probably true of a lot of players. I think if Patrick were around today, he'd probably be shooting 3-pointers and he'd be really good at it. I think it's a little unfair. He came, one shot away from winning a championship. And I think that's what probably does it, because they didn't win in 94, obviously in 99, different circumstances. He got hurt. If he were healthy, could they have beaten San Antonio? Maybe. I mean, Tim Duncan was only in his second year and he was pretty good. And they had David Robinson, but Patrick Ewing, all you need to do, I mean, if you go back and look in the 90s, the Knicks were a playoff team. They were a championship contending team. They won 2 Eastern Conference Finals. Patrick left before the 2000 and then the 01 season. They made the playoffs that year, and then they did not win a playoff series up until, 7 years ago, when under Mike Woodson, they won a playoff series. So when Patrick was there, they were playing every year into May, sometimes into June. And you had this, every game was big. And, and think about the standard you held Patrick to. It was, and I think he didn't mind it. Did you win a championship? You didn't? Well, so you didn't have that great of a season. Now we go nuts if, some of the Knicks players have a good game on a 25-win team, if they win 25 games. So Patrick was held to a crazy standard. I don't think he gets enough credit. I also think the Knicks organization has made a mistake over the years. I'm not saying you got to hire the guy as a head coach. I'm not even saying you have to give him a job, but he's proven that he's willing to be an assistant coach. Name me a top 50 player that was an NBA assistant coach for about 13, 14 years. He worked in Washington, Houston, Orlando, Charlotte. The Knicks couldn't have given him a job. They had 1 million assistant jobs over the years. You couldn't give one to arguably the greatest player in franchise history. That seems a little wrong to me.
I didn't like that. I thought they should have brought him in too. I wasn't a fan of bringing in Derek Fisher. I didn't like Jeff Hornacek, and they had Kurt Rambis in the interim. I wasn't a fan of those guys. So why didn't they bring in Patrick Ewing? That's what I always wondered too. And I know you're a big supporter of Tom Thibodeau right now coming in. I saw your tweets and what you said about them bringing him in, making it the right move. And why is he the right move, you think?
Well, I just think, Tom is – I think with Derek Fisher, so that was he never coached before. And obviously Phil Jackson felt like he had a relationship with him, even though Phil wanted him to hire certain guys on his staff, play a certain way. Then David Fizdale didn't have the experience, and they were selling the fans on, well, he can bring free agents in. It's not that easy to do. Tom is going to work harder. Like, Tom is a great guy. Doesn't have a wife, doesn't have a girlfriend, doesn't have kids. All Tom has is basketball. Now, I get it. People now look at it like, well, maybe he should have other hobbies. No. He's not playing golf. All he's going to do 24/7 is work on making the Knicks better. And he'll do that. He did it in Chicago. He did it in Minnesota. I'm surprised by how many people talk about his tenure in Minnesota. He took over a franchise that never made the playoffs. They made the playoffs. He made a trade for Jimmy Butler, which made Karl-Anthony Towns the second best player on the team. And Andrew Wiggins had a really good year that they were in third place until Butler got hurt, falling out with the owner. And now Minnesota's back to where they were before Tom showed up. If you look at his history, whether it's with Derrick Rose in Chicago, Larry Johnson in New York, we worked closely with, Yao Ming, then in the summertime, Tom would go over to China for 2 or 3 weeks to work with Yao Ming to help him get better. He's a great player development coach. And when you look at this roster, the Knicks have young players. They need to get some better players, and they need to improve from the inside. The best example I could give you is the Golden State Warriors. No free agents were going to Golden State back in the day. Nobody on the level of Kevin Durant. They got lucky in the draft. Steph Curry, Klay Thompson. They got real lucky. Draymond Green in the 3rd round. They make a few smart trades. Now look at them, and then they become attractive to free agents. I think for the Knicks, I don't think you're going to get that off-the-charts free agent that's going to say, yeah, I want to go to New York. Look at what Durant and Kyrie did. They looked at the Nets as having some pieces. They looked like they were stable, and they said, you know what, let's go there. That looks like a better situation. And I think Tom could bring that. Tom and Leon could bring that to the Knicks. You bring stability, and that will attract free agents.
Mm-hmm. Who do you think that they could bring in? I know Gordon Hayward's a free agent this year, as well as DeMar DeRozan and a few other people. Van Vliet. Who do you think the Knicks could bring in this year?
Yeah, it'll be interesting because I think, Leon and Wes, Worldwide Wes, they know a lot of players from their days as agents. Tom's been around forever. So I think all that stuff will help. I think you mentioned a couple of good names. I think the Knicks could be in the running for guys like that. And believe this too. There are steps that you have to take, but there's a lot of organizations that think, in front office guys, you know what? Let's just get a bunch of young players. We'll say we're rebuilding. In 3 years, I'll still have my job. Leon and Tom are looking to win. That doesn't mean they're going to mortgage the future for to try to hit a home run in year one. Every move that they make is going to be to try to make the team better. And I think if you look at what Tom did in Minnesota, he traded Zach LaVine, who's lost. Listen, Zach LaVine is talented, but he had a major knee injury. And look at the teams he's been on. He might have the worst winning percentage in the NBA. He was on awful teams in Minnesota, awful teams in Chicago. And then Lauri Markkanen was the big player that they gave away. And look at Lauri Markkanen. He's regressed. Doesn't mean that he can't get better. But Tom went out and got Jimmy Butler because he felt, you know what, we need to get better with the young guys that I have. So I could see the Knicks doing something like that. Not mortgage the future, but they are in it. Believe me. Tom Thibodeau is not in this job to make money. He's not in the job to become friends with celebrities and hang out with them. Ain't about that. He's trying to win. He knows he was on that bench with Jeff Van Gundy for a number of years in New York. Patrick Ewing, Larry Johnson, Latrell Sprewell, Allen Houston, John Stark, the whole crew, Charles Oakley. He knows. Everyone else comes to New York and they talk about the Mecca and all this stuff. It's like somebody gives them the piece of paper before the press conference. Make sure you mention Mecca basketball and New York City, what it means. Tom knows all that stuff. Like, he's been through it. He's experienced it. He'll do everything he can to get it back to that point.
I've heard reports out there that Leon Rose wants to develop Frank Ntilikina. Is there any sense left in doing this? Because the upcoming draft is right around the corner in October. I believe they're going to have the draft now. Do they draft a point guard in this year's draft? Yeah,
of course, a lot will depend on where they draft. But, Leon did represent Frank. I think Leon's son might still represent him. A lot of teams like Frank Ntilikina. It's funny. You'll tell you the San Antonio Spurs, Greg Popovich has raved about him. My guy, Ron Adams, who worked with Tom for a long time in Chicago, every year when he was an assistant coach with Golden State, the GMs always ranked him as the best assistant coach. He likes Frank Ntilikina. A lot of people like his body type. He's not a great athlete, but he knows how to run a team. It's weird for him. He comes to New York, Phil drafts him, and they fired Phil less than a week later. And New York is one of these places where now guys come in, and does the front office and the coaching staff really have Frank's best interest at heart, or is it all about just fighting for survival? So I think a foreign player coming into a new league at a young age, your head is kind of spinning. And let's face it, you go to the Knicks where it's nonstop chaos and turmoil. It's almost like he's got to take some of the responsibility. It's not all everybody else's fault, but I think he can be salvaged. I absolutely think he can be.
And the triangle didn't work out. I think that's why Phil Jackson brought him in. He thought he could be perfect for the triangle offense, and that didn't work out.
Phil should have coached the team if that's the offense he wanted to run.
Yeah.
Seriously, that's how it should. Because Derek Fisher didn't want to run it.
No.
And the player. Here's the thing that people forget: Derek Fisher actually had a pretty decent relationship with the players. Now, when he left training camp up in West Point, when they were done in West Point, they had like a day off, and he flew out to L.A. and then got in the fight with Matt Barnes. That was not good for Derek Fisher, because that's where that line of you being a coach and still being a player and you become a bit of a laughing stock, that was embarrassing for him. But the players played hard for him. He really had that thing going in the right direction, despite, Phil only caring about playing the silly triangle offense and Phil fighting with Carmelo Anthony all the time. Derek actually had the group in a pretty good place, but Derek was his own worst enemy when he went out to L.A.
Would you say that Phil Jackson set the team back a decade? Because that's how I view it. They were on the right path there in 2012, 2013. They won 54 games, and they lost 28 games. And in the next year, they weren't the same team.
Well, it's like anything. I mean, it's kind of what Leon Rose just did now, too. He comes in, and then you bring your own guy in. Where Mike Woodson did have, the locker room. The guys on the team liked Mike Woodson. Carmelo liked him. But that was Phil wanting to come in right away and change everything. I think what hurt Phil, and I like Kristaps Porzingis a lot. I think that whole situation was not good. Kristaps never should have blown the meeting off. And I think once that happened, I always felt that at some point they're going to get rid of him because the owner is not going to like the fact that Kristaps did that, which was wrong. But they should have done a much better job mending that relationship. I think Phil did some bad things. I thought Porzingis was a good thing. I wasn't crazy about the trade that they made. I think they either should have tried to hold on to him or gotten a better deal.
Was the main reason why they traded him, as it was reported, for them to pursue Kyrie and KD in the offseason?
Oh, absolutely, 100%. They needed to clear salary cap space, 100%. So what happened was, Kristaps wasn't happy. Listen, he was I don't want to say malcontent. I think he was unhappy with the dysfunction around the Knicks and everything. And let's face it, he has a lot of evidence to support what he believed was going on in the organization. They weren't too crazy with him. They called him into a meeting, and they said, listen, we believe we can make a deal, a trade for you. Would you want to go? Do you have a list of teams that you would want to be traded to? And he said, well, I don't know. All right. If you're going to trade me, can you trade me to this team? That, he gave like a list. They already had a deal in place because the night before Dallas had been in town, the Knicks met with Mark Cuban and Donnie Nelson that night. That deal was already done. They brought him in to say, yeah, if you want to trade me, all right, yeah, I'll be traded. They floated it out right away. Kristaps Porzingis demands to be traded. And then within 20 minutes or a half hour, he was traded. That whole thing was set up to make it look like Porzingis marched into the office. I demand to be traded. Do it right now. Let me ask you a question. Kyrie Irving asked to be traded from Cleveland. Kawhi Leonard wanted to be traded from San Antonio. That happened in a half hour. From the time he asked until the time the trade went down. Kyrie Irving, it took about 6 weeks, 2 months? Yeah. Kawhi Leonard took almost a year from the time he said he didn't want to be there until the time he left. So the Knicks had a deal in place already. It was all set up just to make Porzingis be the fall guy. He deserves some of the blame. But the Knicks wanted to get those two guys. They had assurances that Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving would come there. But the thing became a little dysfunctional. Kyrie thought, you know what, I'd rather go to Brooklyn, and Kevin Durant followed him there. I think if Kyrie Irving had come to the Knicks, Kevin Durant would have followed him there. But I said at the time, I was at the game when Durant got hurt up in Toronto. I said, if I'm the Knicks, I'm not going after him. I'm not doing it. Why sign a guy that's already where you guys are as an organization somewhat damaged goods? Let somebody else take a chance on him. And let's face it, Kyrie Irving, they've been better without him, the Nets are. Yep. And Kevin Durant has yet to play a game. And he could have come back in July, but he decided, listen, that's up to him. If he feels like he couldn't come back, go right ahead. I never thought the Knicks should have gone after him. But I got killed because then I said, I wouldn't have gone after him. The Knicks were going after them. So the Knicks not getting those two guys was a failure from their standpoint. Their plan was to get them. Yeah. I didn't think they should have. I think they actually dodged a bullet by not getting them. Where the Knicks were at the stage that they are and where Kyrie and Kevin Durant are, then I always felt the Knicks were better off, and I think so far I've been proven right on that.
Yeah. I thought D'Angelo Russell was a better fit in Brooklyn than Kyrie.
Yeah, and the problem was this was the package deal kind of thing. It's funny, too, when you go back to the All-Star game in Charlotte. Remember when Kyrie and Kevin Durant, they were spotted talking like in the hallway before the game?
Yep.
And everyone was saying maybe they could talk at any time. But that was clearly a package. Yeah, I'm telling you, early in the season, it was the Knicks they trying to move the Tim Hardaway, Courtney Lee contract to open up cap space for Durant and Kyrie. I think if the Knicks could have figured out a way to keep Porzingis, they might have been able to pull that off, because I do think Kyrie and Kevin Durant like Porzingis. But then all of a sudden, it was probably like March or April, the Boston Celtic people were hearing he wants to move back to New York, but he doesn't want to play for the Knicks. So I think like I said, I'm bad at math, but I know there were two teams in New York, and if you don't want to go to one of them, I know what the other team is, and that's exactly what ended up happening.
The thing I don't like about the Nets is that they just co-opt our city pretty much. They came in and took over. Everyone's a Net fan now. On the St. John's campus, you see everyone with Nets jerseys. Back in the day, you see everyone wearing Knicks jerseys.
Well, and I think too, the Nets, I got the colors and the way they're branded and stuff. But here's the thing: winning is what's going to do it. So the Knicks have to get back to winning, and the Nets had done a good job. I thought they were heading in the right direction. I think this year, they kind of took on the personality of the Knicks, getting rid of their coach when they did, and it seemed like, to me, it's fine if Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant are going to have a huge say in what goes on, but they have to produce on the court. Kevin Durant has yet to play, and the Nets have a winning record without Kyrie. They're better without him than they are with him. So that's why, to me, there's going to be a ton of pressure on those guys next season. I don't want to hear any more excuses. They need to go out and they need to produce.
Exactly. That's what they need to do. If you're Scott Perry, Leon Rose, this upcoming draft for the New York Knicks, who are you drafting?
I know they like the New Yorker, the kid who plays for Dayton, Obi Toppin, or played for Dayton, who unfortunately we didn't get to see in the NCAA tournament. If they draft high, can they take Lonzo Ball's brother? That's a possibility. This will be a big draft. Like whenever you're the new guys and you draft and you're in the lottery, when you miss in the lottery, it hurts you. Now the Knicks believe that they can salvage Kevin Knox. That was the high pick of Steve Mills and Scott Perry. Porzingis was a high pick of Phil Jackson. He became an all-star in New York. So that one, in theory, worked out. Ntilikina, the jury is still out. But when you're drafting high, you have to get players that make an impact. Steph Curry was not a top 5 pick. Where did he go? I think he was 7 or 8. Yeah. And Klay Thompson, I think, was either 9 or 10. So you can get good players. You know, it's not really – I always say it's not where you pick. It's always who you pick. You know, Draymond Green was a second-round pick. Manu Ginobili was a second-round pick. Tony Parker was the 29th pick. There are good players in the draft. It's up to you to draft them. And I'll say this, I mean, I know I'm building up Tom to be the savior here, but when Tom was in Chicago, he was pushing the Bulls management because Tom had a good relationship with Tom Izzo. They worked out Draymond Green. He was telling the Bulls, you got to draft this guy, and they didn't draft him. So he's got a pretty good eye for talent.
How about Cole Anthony? He's a name that's come up a bunch of times, plays for UNC.
Yeah, I think, you know, I think what's going to hurt him, and I think Cole Anthony's first of all, he's a very good player. He's very mature. He's coming off an injury, and he didn't have a great year at North Carolina. But I also think he showed a lot of toughness because he was catching a lot of abuse from people. And what I like about him was he got hurt, and he came back knowing that he wasn't going to be at his best. NBA coaches will always talk about injured players coming back knowing that they won't be at their best, and that's how the fans will judge him. Oh, look at him. He looks slow. He doesn't look good. But they're willing to play injured. Patrick Ewing was always like that. Larry Johnson, Charles Oakley, and, you know, Cole Anthony, whose dad played for the Knicks and had that kind of mentality. That, to me, was probably the most impressive thing about him. He didn't shut it down when he got a knee injury. He had the surgery, and he actually came back and played. It says a lot about him.
What's your reaction to when the fans, and I've even said it myself, watch Tom Thibodeau come in here, take over this organization, then there goes RJ's knees because we saw what happened.
Oh, that's a bunch of nonsense. That's a bunch of nonsense. You know, when Derrick Rose had a chance to play again for Tom, those knees you're talking about, he went running back to Minnesota to play for him. And when Joakim Noah was in Chicago after Tom left, he said, you know what, I have a different appreciation for Tom, and he wanted to go play for him in Minnesota. Then obviously you know, Tom wasn't there anymore. So I think if you look at the players that have played for him, whether as an assistant coach in New York, Boston, Houston, as a head coach, especially in Chicago, I think, you know, he and Jimmy Butler have a very good relationship. I don't like the way Butler handled his exit in Minnesota, but they still remain close. Go ask Brian Scalabrine. Brian Scalabrine played for Tom in Boston. He played for Tom in Chicago. Tom was the assistant coach in Boston. But he'll tell you about the practices that Tom runs. They're very short, but they're very, like, detail-oriented. It's not a lot of running. It's a lot of, you know, just going over stuff. Now, training camp will be hard because that's, you know, you have basically 2 full weeks of practice. But once the season starts, they do not practice a lot. No NBA teams do anymore. The players now, they've complained so much about playing games that they basically eliminated practice. So that part of it is absurd. If you look, the young guys over the years, look, any great player, they all play a ton of minutes. That's the key to winning. If you have great players, you got to play them a lot. Tim Duncan played a lot, Michael Jordan, LeBron James. Look at the minutes LeBron has played over the years. Crazy.
Do you think RJ is that guy for the Knicks, that LeBron type of level player that'll take him?
No, I don't think he's athletic enough. So, you know, he's got kind of a different game. Physically, he can't take over a game like that. He could still be very good. I think you're going to see him make a bigger jump in year 2. I think he'll be a lot different player than he was the first year. And I mean, come on, the guy joins the team. He's already on his 3rd coach. He hasn't been through an 82-game season yet, and he has 3 coaches. But I think he'll be a lot better next season.
I hope so. I'm sick of all the bus.
I hear you.
It's rough, but I want to get into your book that you wrote. Was it back in 1998?
Yeah.
Just Ballin, right?
A million years ago. I'm actually working on a book with Charles Oakley. Hopefully it works out. We'll relive the 90 Knicks and everything else and every crazy other thing that he did, like beating up Charles Barkley. But yeah, that book was based on that '99 season, which was a crazy year. For people who don't know, if you watch The Last Dance, so Michael, I was lucky enough to be at that game in Utah. Michael hits that shot, last ever shot with the Bulls. He decides to retire, which I always felt was a mistake at the time, because if Michael had retired and had decided to stick around one more year, if the Bulls ran it back, they would have had off July, August, September, October, November, December, and then the lockout ended sometime in early November. So they would have been off for 6.5 months. Plenty of time for them to kind of rest and recover. So Jordan leaves. When the lockout ends, Jordan decides to retire. We went to the press conference in Chicago. All the New York writers went, and it was at that point where the Knicks trading for Sprewell was gaining momentum. And that's when the Knicks were rolling the dice, and they're saying, Michael Jordan is gone. We're going for it. And, Sprewell was as controversial as a player, a professional athlete, as you're ever going to find after what had happened. And, he came to New York. The fans embraced him. He was very transparent. Every arena that we went to, the writers of that city would ask him about the PJ Carlesimo incident, the fallout, all the suspension that he had. Every day he answered every question. So he handled it really well. He and Marcus Camby had a terrific year. The Knicks got a little lucky, the shot against Miami. Obviously, the Larry Johnson 4-point play against Indiana. It was a magical year up until Patrick Ewing getting hurt. Larry Johnson then got hurt in Game 6 against Indiana. So in the finals, no Patrick, and Larry Johnson wasn't himself. He had a bad knee, so they really didn't have much of a chance.
What can we expect from the upcoming book with Charles Oakley?
It's going to be a lot of Charles Oakley, a lot of people getting punched in the face, a lot of Charles Oakley, being pretty open and honest about a lot of things. It's typical Charles. He's a terrific guy. He loves the Knicks, even though there's a bit of a strain in the relationship. He bleeds orange and blue, that's for sure.
Yeah. And he was going through a little rough stint there with Patrick Ewing.
Yeah, I think that part of it is tough. I think, it's funny. When Patrick announced that he had the coronavirus and he went into the hospital, which I was like surprised. I was like, man, it's one thing to get it. I didn't know that Patrick had to be hospitalized. Yeah. And then Charles sent out that tweet where he wished him the best. And he said, you'll always be my brother. I'll always be next to you. Let me tell you something about Charles Oakley. There is no chance that somebody said, hey, you've been getting killed for some of the stuff you said about Patrick. You should tweet this out. This will be good for you. There's no chance that happened. No way. That's Charles. What you see is what you get. And when he tweeted that out, that was coming from the heart. So I think that ultimately told you a lot about their relationship. I think Charles was frustrated about a lot of stuff. And, what he said about Patrick, I don't really necessarily agree with. I think Patrick had an unbelievable run with the Knicks. But I think it says a lot about their relationship, that tweet that he sent out about Patrick once it was revealed that Patrick had the coronavirus.
Why didn't the Knicks keep Latrell Sprewell?
If you, it's kind of complicated, but the year. So I just mentioned how when Latrell, his first year with the Knicks, he does great with the media. The Knicks make the, they obviously have the great run in the playoffs. The following year, they had a situation where they lost to Toronto in the first round, and that year, it came out. There was a story that had come out about the Knicks and religion and all this stuff. And Jim Dolan had felt that that the players needed media training, and they also their interviews needed to be monitored. So they brought the players in for a media training session after an exhibition game. Latrell bailed out, and Jim Dolan was ticked off. And he told Jeff Van Gundy, he's like, your players are out of control. You got to get control of them. Jeff said that's not true. Latrell Sprewell is very much in control. So I think that relationship started turning south. And then, of course, a situation on the boat where Latrell showed up late for training camp and he had the broken hand. They suspended him. It became a mess by then. Once it turned with Jim Dolan and Latrell Sprewell, there was no going back, just like it kind of did with Jim Dolan and Kristaps Porzingis. Sometimes there's no turning back from that.
As a writer yourself, you faced backlash from players. Marbury, Phil Jackson wasn't a fan of some of your tweets and reports that you wrote up. We're in this era where people say that certain things aren't legit with the whole fake news term. Does that affect the sports world too, as being a sports reporter?
It's funny you say that. I think back to when not only Twitter first started, but there came a point where your stories on the internet, you'd write a story and then they would have the comments section. And I was always blown away by how many people thought you were making stuff up. Not even so much, oh, you have an agenda. Everything is you have an agenda. But I was always surprised when you would write a story and people were so cavalier with the idea that, oh, you just made that up, or that's not true. You don't have any sources. And I would always think, well, first of all, I would get fired for something like that, number one. Number two, if I'm going to make up a story, it's going to be a doozy. It's not going to be something, just a state, run of the mill. But I was always surprised by that, how many people thought, and a lot of times it came down to if they didn't like the story. I'll give you an example. The Knicks Isaiah Thomas was running the team, and the Knicks nearly traded Zach Randolph to the Milwaukee Bucks. And it was this really complicated deal. And I found out about it like the night before the trade deadline. The Knicks were in Philadelphia. It was this whole complicated deal. A lot of players back and forth. One of the agents of one of the players told me the deal was just about done, but the owner of the Bucks at the time, Herb Cole, killed the deal. The next day, the Knicks had a game the next day, and a reporter asked Isaiah about it. He denied it. And then I know he had huddled up with a bunch of reporters, and he was like, that's not true. It never happened. And I was getting murdered for that story. At the end of the year, Herb Cole fired Larry Harris, Del Harris's son, who was the GM. And during that press conference, Herb Cole said, we had a couple of disagreements. We had a deal in place with the Knicks, which I decided to kill that deal. I couldn't believe that he said that. Just listen, I took that clip and I sent it to like the Knicks PR staff. And I said, if you guys now want to issue a public apology, I said, that'll be fine. Knowing full well that they weren't going to do it. But again, it goes back to, these stories that come out, like Stephen Bondi had a story the other day about the Knicks and Jason Kidd. That story was legitimate. The Knicks contract stuff with Tom there was a lot of back and forth. And there was this idea, maybe we'll just keep Mike Miller for a year. Maybe we'll bring in Jason Kidd. So he wrote that. And if you read his story, he even said, well, the negotiations with Tom could start up again. And that's exactly what happened. Who planted that story? Who had the motivation to plant that story? That is open for debate. But there's no doubt in my mind that he got that story from a legitimate person who was involved in the conversation, whether Jason Kidd, the Knicks, I doubt it was Tom, somebody involved, maybe somebody from one of Mike Miller's people, who knows, but somebody gave him that story.
I got to get into this because I remember last year I was listening to the rant on the radio from Joe Beningo when he had you on when the whole Kevin Durant fiasco on. What was it like calling into that show and him just ripping on you and even you off?
Well, the thing was they called me.
Oh, okay.
So it's the same thing, if you asked me to be on this, so you could ask me anything you want, but I think you're also being respectful to the point that if I'm trying to give an answer, you're just not going to start shouting me down. So listen, I get it with Joe. It's a lot of shtick, and I had done SNY with Joe for a long time. I had gone on, when Joe was starting out, he was doing overnights. I would go on with him after Knick games at 2 a.m. Mm-hmm. So listen, I was friendly with him. They asked me to come on, and I thought he was totally out of line. And then he hung up on me. He called me up, I think the next day or 2 days later. I didn't answer the phone. He left a message. He apologized. He said, if you want to come on anytime. I said, no, I'm done with you. I said, it was totally out of line what he did. It was wrong. And everyone, he shot you down. First of all, and I made this point to you before, the Knicks were trying to get Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant. If you think them not getting them was good, that's fine. But they wanted to get them. Their plan was to get those guys. They didn't get them. I said this because he kept saying, if they'd got him, you'd be killing him. I said, no. I said that they shouldn't go after him. I was the one that wrote that they shouldn't go after Kevin Durant. He wasn't even listening to what I was saying. But the point was the Knicks wanted Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant. Everyone in the NBA knows that. I don't care how they're trying to spin it. The story is they wanted him. They didn't get those guys. I don't understand why he couldn't listen to what I was saying, and he just started screaming. Then he hung up on me. So that was it.
It's just an embarrassment, I think, for the New York Knicks, the fact that they didn't get them. Because every Knicks fan, I wanted Kevin Durant. Yeah. I think it was worth the risk, but at the same time, you're right. We haven't seen Kevin Durant on the floor yet as a Brooklyn Net. We don't know if he's going to be the same player.
You don't. And that's my concern would be, all right, so we had Achilles. First of all, when the guy's healthy, he's top 3 player in the league. sometimes he looks like the best player in the league. You know, he was great in the 2 finals that he played against LeBron. So, I mean, the talent is unquestioned. But he is coming back from Achilles. And what would concern me was he was going to be ruled out this season. There were rumors going around that he was going to come back for the playoffs if Kyrie Irving were available. If they were both healthy, they'd play. I think the fact that Kyrie, maybe he's not all the way back, that's why Kevin Durant didn't want to play. But my thing was, you love to play basketball. You tell us all the time. You were kind of given a huge break here. If the NBA season had gone right through, no stoppages, you would have been out. The fact that it's July, your agent had come out 5 months ago and said, don't rule him out yet for the Olympics. The Olympics were supposed to start a week ago. So if you're saying 5 months ago he might be available for the Olympics, and the last time we saw Kevin Durant on the basketball court was in March, there was a video of him dunking on Nicholas Claxton. If you could do that in March, April, May, June, July, it's 4 months later. I don't know. To me, it's like you've already pocketed $30 million from the Nets. If you're hurt, do not play. I'm not saying that he should play if he's injured, but it's been 15 months. Why not come back? And you're coming back at a time. You're not doing what you did in the finals last year where you come back and everyone else is way ahead of you. Everyone else had a 4-month layoff. If you had shown up for training camp just with everybody else, it'd be the same thing. I was a little surprised. If you're hurt, don't play. But to me, I was a little bummed out because I figured you kind of caught a lucky break here. You missed the regular season, but you still get to play in the playoffs, but he ended up not playing.
Who do you think wins the NBA Finals this year in your mind?
Who will it be? I think it'll be the Clippers and the Milwaukee Bucks. I think Milwaukee's focused enough. Toronto's dangerous. The Celtics are dangerous. And obviously LeBron, if he plays the Clippers in the conference finals, it'll be tough to beat him. But Kawhi Leonard has been great. When the Clippers play small, they have a big advantage over the Lakers. They've already beaten them this year. So I think it'll be those two teams.
I cover hip-hop on my show as well. I know Lil Wayne has said things about you before, which I don't agree with because what you said, I think, made perfect sense. He was next to Odell Beckham. We can't take that serious.
Yeah. I'm trying to think if I spoke to him or I sent out a tweet or I might have said on the air. I said, to be fair, I didn't mean that don't take Lil Wayne seriously. I meant, how can you take Odell Beckham seriously when he's bringing like a friend to do an interview to talk about the Giants? It was embarrassing. It looked bizarre. It looked like, like Lil Wayne was like his little brother or something. It was a little bizarre. And listen to it. And Odell Beckham is a great player, unbelievable talent, but there's too much drama with him. Not enough production, too much drama.
He's like Jamal Adams.
Yeah, who's a great player too. Who, by the way, is durable. I think he's played in 46 out of 48 games, but I think the Jets have won 16 of those games.
Yeah.
So they don't win a lot of games. But he's a great player, but, I think there's too much aggravation at times.
There is. It brings me to my next question for hip-hop artists. Are you a fan of hip-hop?
You want my kids to come down here now? And I like Jay-Z. Does that count?
Yeah, that counts.
If I don't know the songs, I don't know the artist, but I know the songs.
Okay.
How about that? I do like Lizzo too. I think, but I guess she's not technically hip hop, is she?
I mean, pop. You consider her pop.
Yeah.
R&B maybe.
Yeah, but I do like Jay-Z. I do like my guy Chuck D, who's a huge Knicks fan too.
Oh yeah, Public Enemy.
Oh my God! And then I guess it was the anniversary of Do the Right Thing, and that song, Don't
Fight
Believe the Hype. It's Fight the Power. Fight the Power. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And the opening scene with Rosie Perez dancing, that's an unbelievable opening scene. I got to interview her on Sirius a few years ago. She was really cool, really down to earth. But that's a great opening to a movie. I like that.
Yeah, it is. That's a classic movie as well. Spike Lee's a huge Knicks fan. I know he's disgruntled of what happened.
Yeah. Let me ask you something. So the next time I'm on a show and they ask me give me some hip hop people that I should mention.
Should mention Nas.
I'm not going to mention Jack Harlow.
Oh, Lou Williams.
I'm not going to mention that.
You gotta mention Nas, Big Pun.
Yeah. Big Pun. I did see. Is it Q-Tip?
Q-Tip from A Tribe Called Quest.
Yeah, I saw him out one night in a diner not too far from Madison Square Garden after a Knicks game. Yeah, that was pretty cool. Very
Joe's
low
a big
key.
one too.
Very low key. Very mellow. Yeah.
Fat Joe's
All
a
right.
big one. He's a Knicks fan.
Who's that?
Fat Joe.
Oh yeah, I could have mentioned him.
Yeah.
I like that video from years ago with him and Stephon Marbury. I think that was shot in L.A. This is
Oh.
years ago, like by a pool. Obviously, there's a pool. Usually, women in bikinis. It's it's a staple of rap videos.
And you can't forget the two all-time greats, Biggie Smalls and Tupac.
Yeah, I like that too. Yeah, Biggie's very good.
Yeah.
I like all that stuff.
What's your go-to genre of music then?
Oh man, I'm gonna sound like a typical white boy here. I mean, I like all that stuff, but I do like as I got older, I kind of like rock music a little bit more.
Who's your favorite rock artist?
Like I like U2, Pearl Jam, that kind of stuff. Yeah. But when I'm with my kid, my kids are in their early 20s, so they listen, so I listen to what they want to listen to when we're in the car, which is fine. Like I said, I love that Lizzo song. I think it's hilarious. The two songs she sings.
I can relate to rock because I've been to a Billy Joel and a Kiss concert.
Yeah. Who took you there? Your parents?
Yeah.
Yeah. Where'd you see? You saw Billy Joel at Madison Square Garden.
I saw him New Year's Eve at Barclays Center a few years ago.
Oh wow, yeah. I've seen him before. U2 in concert's very good. Well, you like this one. I flew out to Portland. My wife didn't like this story. I flew out to Portland for one day because U2 was playing their last U.S. gig. The warm-up act for U2, and we were right. We got there early. One of us had the special band, which they allow you're allowed into a standing section, which only a few people are allowed to go. Kanye West was the warm-up act. And he came out. He was with all these women that were playing violins.
Uh-huh.
And he came out with like a boombox. And he was he was so good. He was terrific. He really was good. I once went where they had Kanye West as a warm-up act and Damian Marley.
Okay.
It was really good. Yeah. So yes, I've been around a little bit. I know it doesn't sound cool. Oh boy.
No, but everyone has a different taste in music. But do you see the NBA, getting back to the sports, do you see the NBA finishing with COVID-19, even though in the bubble city it was announced that no players tested positive?
Yeah, as long as guys stay out of Magic City and aren't going to eat chicken wings. The MLS has been down there for over a month. The last 3 weeks of testing, no positive results. So the MLS is in a bubble at Disney. They're playing at Wide World of Sports, just like the NBA. They're following all those protocols, and they're able to pull up their tournament. Now, remember, they did send two teams home early on, Nashville and FC Dallas. They had a lot of players who had tested positive, so they were worried, and they said, you know what? You're out. We don't want you to infect other teams, so they sent them home. But they've been able to pull it off, so I think that's the best example of it right now.
Now, who's your football and baseball team?
You're not going to like this one. I'm a big Patriot fan just because I loved Belichick and Brady. I always felt like they were so much smarter than everybody else. So I'm where I live, I run into a lot of the Giants. Last summer, a restaurant that I go to, Eli Manning had brought Daniel Jones and Kyle Lauletta, and I forget who the other quarterback was. He brought them out for dinner. It was like right during training camp, which was pretty cool. I like the Giants and I like the Jets, but I just like Bill Belichick. I like the fact that everybody can't stand Bill Belichick. I like the fact that he's great at what he does. So that's why I kind of root for Bill Belichick and the Patriots. I'm bummed out at Brady. He should have stayed. It's not going to work out in Tampa.
You don't think so?
Nah. You know what? It's like all these players. Even Patrick was the same way. Maybe you feel like it's time to go, but when you go, you'll notice how different it is. Because when you're the guy, like it's one thing to be the guy in New England. You're not necessarily the guy that you're kind of going in there as a new player. Even though I get it, you have the status, the resume, and all that stuff. You're still going to be viewed a little bit differently. You know, Tom Brady walks on water in New England. I don't know if he'll be able to walk on water in Tampa.
It's different down there. It's different. Yep. For baseball, are you a Mets fan?
See, you're not going to like this one either. I like both New York teams.
Okay.
I just do. I like when when the Yankees went on that great. I will say this: when the Yankees played the Mets in the World Series, I wanted the Mets to win because the Yankees had won a lot already. You know, the Yankees. I appreciate what the Yankees do because their organization is just about winning championships. Doesn't mean they always do it the right way, but they're always trying to win. Look at what happened to them last year. And what do? We'll go out and get Garrett Cole. People don't have to like it, but they're always trying to win. The Mets kind of, to me, too often operate like a small market team. And you can't. My brother moved to D.C. His son is a huge Nationals fan. So I was happy last year when they went. And I spent a lot of time in D.C. because I do PTI maybe 30 times a year. So I spent a lot of time down there. So I was rooting for the Nationals last year. That was a lot of fun when they won.
Mm-hmm. You brought up the Subway Series from 2000. So you remember Roger Clemens throwing the bat at Mike Piazza.
I was at that game.
How was the energy of that game? Because you see the clips and you see the two benches come out.
It was weird because, so obviously it's a World Series game, and we all knew the history because earlier that season, Clemens had hit Piazza right square in the head and knocked him out. So when he breaks his bat, and all, Clemens sees, he's so like wired up. You could maybe guess why he's wired up. And he takes the bat, to throw it at him. I'm surprised. It's not even so much that Piazza didn't charge the mound. I'm going to forget the player's name. Oh, man. But there was a player on the Mets who was like a backup utility infielder. He was talking, what was his name? Lenny? I forget. But he was talking a lot. Like, to my thing, they had mentioned after Clemens had hit Piazza the first time, the Mets did a lot of talking. Well, here was your opportunity. I thought the Mets lost the World Series when nobody went after Clemens right there in that moment. Like, he's already knocked Piazza out once. He's now throwing a broken bat at him, which really could injure him. Yeah. This is your star player. Let me ask you a question. If that had happened to Derek Jeter, hitting the head, and then months later in the World Series, the same guy throws a bat at him, you don't think the Yankees are charging the mound going after the pitcher?
They are.
I thought the Mets lost. They lost game one when Benitez couldn't get out Paul O'Neill, who couldn't even move. He should have thrown the ball. He couldn't hit or move. He walked him, remember? He should have thrown the ball underhand to him. Let him hit the ball. He never was going to hit it. That was a killer. And then game two, not going after Clemens was, to me, demoralized the Mets.
Yeah, I agree. They didn't stand up for themselves.
Nope.
And that's what happened. Frank Isola, is there anything else that you'd like to get on the show here tonight?
Well, you already gave me the hip-hop. I was listening to a song before I came on. I couldn't believe some of the language in that song. It was unbelievable. It was almost making me blush. But give me the station, so this way I know I got to get cooler and listen to some more hip-hop.
You can listen to WSJU Radio. There's been no one in the studio since the last week of February.
Wow.
Yeah, so we had elections and everything, and I was elected president over the ballot. Yeah, I was elected president over the whole break since we've been in our house because we had to do classes in our house because of COVID-19. And then now it's just everyone's on their own, doing their own thing on their own platform, promoting the station.
That's good. Yeah, that's really good. Well, I wish you the best. I'll listen to more hip hop so I sound cooler the next time.
Yeah, you got to come on again.
All right.
All right, Frank.
Good seeing you.
Yeah, it was good seeing you. Thank you, and take care and stay safe.
Thanks. You too. Take care.